This is the Mystic Girl Cult, a safe space to celebrate the journey to find your most magical self. No judgment, no hate, just stardust trying to find its shape. I'm your host, Amy. Get ready to be indoctrinated into the circle. Our guest today is Chelsea Perrotty Talbot. She is a writer and social media professional trying her hardest to break into the television writing world. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and their incredibly neurotic dog, Bilbo Wagons. Let's get right into our conversation. Hey, Chelsea.
Hello, Amy. How are you today?
It's a weird day.
It is. It's raining in LA, so.
Which is always traumatic, and people decide that it's the end of the world, the sky is falling, Chicken Little is correct with everything.
Then they can't drive, so that makes everything that much worse.
Yep. And when you have to get gas in the rain.
I smell like gas right now because I think it just poured out of my car, and I was like, oh, that's where we are.
I can't smell it, but I just remember the traumatic thing of having to drive to a different gas station because the one I went to was out of gas.
No.
Yeah, in the rain.
That's just rude. Come on, LA.
LA can't function as a city.
That's true.
But that's a discussion for another day.
Why do we live here again?
Because of the entertainment industry. Wow.
Segue.
Look at that magic. Well, welcome to the Mystic Girl Cult podcast. You are now indoctrinated, initiated, all of that kind of thing.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you to the Academy for accepting me here.
The Academy of me.
Of you. Still prestigious.
Which is a very big fan. You and I both came out here because of the really fun thing that is the world of entertainment.
We did. I kind of stumbled into it.
Yes. So and how did that happen?
So I'm from New Jersey, born and raised in a town that basically is Pleasantville, New Jersey.
Good Lord.
I know. It literally was perfection. I actually just told a story yesterday that our town was so safe growing up that we would leave our cars unlocked with our car keys in the car, in the driveway.
So are you Reese Witherspoon?
Basically. I grew up in that environment. It's like kids would go outside and play after school and you'd meet up at the playground, and it was just the weirdest.
Wow.
Looking back,
I never knew those places actually existed.
Oh, yeah.
But then I grew up where there was no sidewalks, so.
Oh, okay.
Florida.
Yeah. There's Florida. And I studied in a small college in New Jersey and went to London to study abroad, and then...
Which is really cool.
Highly recommend everyone. I always say to people that are about to go into college, everyone needs to study abroad. It's where I found myself as a person, not to sound cliche, but it truly was a formative time in my life. And then moved back and wanted to move to London, and my mom was very mad about that. And she would always say to me, I would much rather you live in California. And I was like, it's Ma.
Does she regret that today?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Because I throw it back in her face. I'm like,
yep.
You said to me so many years.
Yeah, it's you encouraged this, mother.
I'm like, you actually made it happen because you said you didn't want me to move to London. You wanted me to go to California. What she'll probably listen and be mad, so sorry, Mom. And then...
I'm glad you told her to, because otherwise I would not have met you, most likely.
And then I was in New York trying to find a job after college, as everyone knows is the worst thing in the world.
Yep.
Took me a year to move to California to get my first job. And I ended up meeting my now husband, Jack.
Who's a great guy.
Who's so good and so smart, and just I could go on and on about him.
And you've been married for almost 2 years?
It'll be 2 years this year.
Yeah.
He's the best. And we met, and his job, we were about 6 months maybe into dating, and he said, we just got news that they're closing our office on Long Island, and they are probably going to move me to Florida.
Don't do that, man. Don't do it.
And I said...
No offense to anyone from Florida.
Absolutely not. Are there any other places that you could transfer to?
Would you be going to Cape Canaveral?
It was Melbourne, Florida. Which is funny now because my dad lives down in Cocoa Beach. So he is always like, oh, if you'd moved there, I would have been close. So the other option was San Diego or Los Angeles. And I said, I have family in LA. I've been to LA. I live in LA. And he was like, yeah, I would too. So and within like 2 or 3 months, had decided to move to Los Angeles and drove cross country in July. He started, I think, his job on August 5th of 2013. And then I got my job in like September. And it took over a year of searching and applying in New York City and going on like, informational.
What kind of jobs were you looking for?
I was looking for magazine industry and...
Because you're a writer.
Yes. I am a writer. I studied creative writing and English in college. And I knew, at that point, I wanted to write books. I mean, we met...
we met at a bookstore.
We met while working at Barnes & Noble.
As have I with almost everyone who's been on this podcast so far. It's a good place to meet really good people.
Yeah. Book people are good people.
Yes. But you found another.
I did, yeah.
way.
So we moved down here and I got my first job at a gossip tabloid, which I will not name because then I can't talk about it.
Nope. It is just gossip.
Gossip tabloid.
Gossip tabloid.
It's a very famous.
.co.uk.
Yes, very famous. Very famous one. And I met all my friends. I'm still friends with all the people, most of the people I worked with, and
I've met a few of them. They're very nice people.
They're very, very, very great people. And I'd say half of them were also writing screenplays. And one of my good friends, Brian, he suggested, I sent him, I think, like, maybe I had written this scene for an idea I had because it came to me in a dream. Just so,
as all of the great ones do. You gotta get them before they fall.
It was like just such like imagery, and I had to like write it down. But I personally found out that I hate writing prose.
You don't like that purple script, the flowery language.
I hate it, and like sometimes I find like if I'm reading, I will do it without noticing that I kind of skip. I'll skip large texts, large like blocks of text, because I'm like, do I really need that? Like, do I really need to?
Can I just get to this point?
Exactly. So I was like, but I love writing dialogue, and even my professors in college were like, you have some of the most realistic dialogue, like that's definitely your strong point. And I was like, oh thanks, like guess I gotta work on the prose. But I had sent him I think like 10 pages or something, and he was like, this feels like an intro to a story, not the end, because I was kind of like, it's she like discovers this thing, and he was like, are you having trouble? And I was like, well, I hate writing prose, but like you have to
fill up a novel.
Yeah,
just imagine
to write a book.
Imagine just reading the novel of just all that. It would be the text Shakespeare books that came out. Yep.
Yes. So I was like, oh yeah, like you're right. And he was like, you should really try writing it as a script. Biggest regret I ever have is that in college I didn't take any of the screenwriting electives.
So when you were thinking about what you want to do, you never really thought of anything to do with movies or television?
No, not at all. I was only in the sense of like, I'd love my books to be turned into like that was like my thought process.
Gotcha, yeah.
So I was just kind of like, this television and film is just this thing I enjoy. But I'm going to be an author, because reading was my escape, and I wanted to, provide that to other little girls. But then I moved out here, and he was like, you really, really, really should try it. And I was like, well, I've never done it before. And he was like, literally just read scripts. Like, so many people have said that to me. They're like, it's the same format, basically. Like, once you get it down.
Having read many for acting classes.
Yeah.
It follows a pattern.
And like, it's the same structurally, which is very nice because, books are similar but not, and you're like...
Well, with screenplays, they at least have to have all the points so that whoever's reading it can actually picture what's going on versus all the prose, which lets you imagine these things.
Absolutely. And like, that I think is one of the hardest things I've had to do in my script writing is I came from books. I came from studying novel. One of my teachers that I just studied with, Miguel, he's great, he was saying that like with scripts you're never supposed to use ing words because it's in the moment, it's present, like you have to be in present tense. And that's so different from book writing because you're looking at it from the outside, but with scripts, you're actually there in that moment. And that was like a light bulb moment for me that I was like, oh, this is one of the ways it differs from like what I studied. And I was just kind of like, huh. And now I'm catching myself when I'm writing not doing that and being like, oh, no. ING, no ING words, no ING words.
So did you just start out just reading scripts? You didn't do classes for it? You didn't do anything like that?
I didn't do classes. I bought a book. I can't remember the name of it, but it had Bob's Burgers on the cover.
I mean, that's how you know it's a good book.
So I read this book and kind of got it, not really. But I was like reading and I was working, so I wasn't really, I would kind of tinker with it. And it took me, I want to say 2 years from him saying that to actually completing my first script.
Is that the one that I read?
I think so, yes. Yes. So, and that was the first script I ever, it went from the first time I finished it, it was like 35 pages. It was so bad. Like, I was like, I did it, I finished. And then he was like, well, is this going to be hour long? Because it should be like 50 pages. And I was like, People are so great. Like, my friends read it and they were like, this is the starting point, yes. Which is good, encouraging things to a new writer, because you're just kind of like, I was just happy I finished something.
Yeah, and people are supportive of it because they're like, no, you're doing this.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And it was like, you finished. And I was like, this is the first thing truly, I've ever finished, because I never finished a book. I'd always kind of hit a wall and I'd be like, why am I hitting a wall? And it was because I hated prose, so of course I'm going to hit a wall. But scripts don't have prose really, and it's that also I've found out is I will overwrite the descriptions, and I've had to
learn how to peel back.
Yeah, because in my head I see
here's
it.
this bone. I need to get to the important bit and not all the fat that's on it.
But sometimes I'm like, oh, I need to describe this for the scene, and I've had people say you think you need to, but you don't actually have to. That's the set designer will do that, or this, and they're like, for now, keep it simple.
I have not done a lot of screenwriting. Is it weird to you to know that you're putting all this effort and all this into a script with all this imagination, and then it's going to be the responsibility of all these other people to actually see what you're talking about, but then it's their imagination that takes hold?
It's weird, and there's another podcast I listen to called Happier in Hollywood, and I love, and it's these two showrunners, and they're talking about being in Hollywood. Yes. And they had a really good point that that's one of the differences between television and movies, is that in television, and which is I think why I like writing television, the writer is in control. So the showrunner is kind of making sure all of those decisions line up with what they see in their head. But with movies, you write the script and then it's gone. It's not yours anymore. There's so many other people doing it, which I don't, I've written movies and I don't mind that, but I like the sense of control.
Yes.
So I'm always like, I think I would just want to
so you want to
stick with television.
Be in the writer's room where you have all that stuff going on.
Yes, and even when you eventually become a showrunner, you're the one saying, yes, no, this is good, this is bad. I don't want this. No, she can't wear the green shirt. She has to wear the red shirt. Those people are making those decisions, but ultimately you have the final say, whereas in movies, you do not have the final say at all.
With television also, you have the continuity stuff. Absolutely. And you have all this other thing where they have to kind of follow along the thing because you're telling a larger story. So if they don't, they made a big mistake.
Yes, absolutely. And it's I've only had one thing get made from script, and it was really cool just to see maybe I thought the Christmas tree was in the other corner in the other room, but that's a detail that doesn't really matter. It's more about the people on screen and
connecting with them.
Yeah, and as long as you kind of get the core, which is what a script is, the core of the story, however it's interpreted by the other people, it's still your story and it's still beautiful, and you're just like, oh my god, something I wrote, people are saying these words. It is weird. It's weird, because another thing about it is you might have envisioned the character in a completely different outfit, but there's a costume designer who's yes, you said she's wearing this blue shirt, but this is the whole, maybe she's wearing a blue jumpsuit, and you're like, oh, that's so much better than I ever could have thought.
So you started out working for the tabloid.
Yes.
And went from there.
I did.
It had some rocky moments.
Oh, for sure. It was fine. It was my first job out of college, so I was very grateful.
I mean, that's a great job to have out of college.
It was great. It was a lot of talking in the voice of someone else.
I'm familiar.
Which is a skill that I've learned that, you know, I kind of pride myself on, and I think it will be very helpful in television writing because I can kind of call myself like a story chameleon because I can kind of make it sound like someone else because I've had to do that in lots of different parts of my career. But when I finally left that job, it was so nice to not have to say, like, LOLs, oh my God. Like, you know.
I mean, I remember we took a hike right after that, and you seemed so much more free-spirited after that. It was nice to see.
I love everyone I met. Like, we all, that was the only reason why we were happy, quote unquote, there, is because we had each other. Like, because we were all just, this is not fun. And I liked that job, and it was my first job and whatever, but we had to work on the East Coast time.
Oh.
So I was in the office from 6 a.m. until 3 because we had to be there for the start of the, you know, East Coast news cycle. So that's what made me a morning person.
And has that continued?
Yeah. I mean, I wake up with Jack, so because he's up at 7 to go to work.
Yep.
So I just get up and start my day with that. So I'm just like, you know, the latest I can sleep in though now is like 9.
Same.
Which is, I'm like, yes. Everyone's like, what? That's not late. I'm like,
but you don't know.
I'm like, it is though.
So after that job, you did some odds and ends jobs before you got back into a writing sort of career.
I did. After that job, I briefly worked at a magazine tabloid, which I did not like. I found out that I'm not good at exploiting people for their secrets on celebrities.
I mean, that is a good fault to have.
It absolutely is. And like we were talking before about how I was looking at magazine jobs.
Yep.
And I always, you know, growing up outside of New York, I always thought I wanted to work at like Cosmo or all these big magazines, but actually working in that environment, it's so slow. Like slow in the sense of like you take a week to create, you know, it was a weekly tabloid. So like to create that issue, it takes a week.
Yep.
Whereas, you know, I got one scoop the like 3 months that I worked there. And I got it and I was like, we should post this. Like,
because it's relevant. It's now.
And they were like, well, we have to wait. It's going to come out in an issue. And having worked in the internet versus a magazine, I was like, this is not. I like the more high stakes newsroom type of like, we got to get it out the next day as soon as possible. Like, it was so weird to me to be like, so I have to wait till Wednesday for this to come out?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I don't want to. Like, so I'm always grateful to that position because I did it.
Yeah, and you learned something about what you do or don't want to do.
Exactly, and it was very like, okay, did it, tried it, 3 months, on to the next thing.
That's also really good, like, thing to have to know when a job does not suit you so that you can then move on without it becoming a burden on you to do well at something that you're like, this is not good.
For sure. And like you know, when I interview places and have to talk about it, I say like, you know, I'm really grateful to doing that job, even though it was very short, because a lot of people ask, you know, you were only there for like 3 months. And I'm like, well, you know, I quickly found out it was not for me. And had I not done something like that, I probably would always be like, what about magazines? You know, and now I'm just like,
I mean, TV makes it look like a magical wonderland.
It really does.
But that's good TV writing.
Exactly.
And so you can go write yourself into a magazine thing and make it whatever you want.
I know, I'm like, the Bold type would love to work there.
I love that show. It's amazing.
It's based on Cosmo, which was like, I loved reading that when I was younger, and I was like, I want to be cool like the people in Cosmo, and I want to work at Cosmo.
Okay. This is a complete aside from our general conversation. Of the Bold type, which job would you want?
I've only seen 1 episode, so
that's fine. Of the people, One thing, I recommend watching the series. It's
I
fun.
need to. This is the side note is that I work from home, so I binge watch things while I'm working, and it's my next binge watch.
So would you rather be the writer on all the editorials, be the person who's running the social media, or be the person who's the assistant working and being on set doing that job? Like doing setups and shoots.
I think I work in social media at the moment, so I don't think I would want to do that for them, although it would be really fun to be the social media person for a brand like that. I write, so I would love to do the writing, but I feel like with having worked in a magazine, it's a very specific type of writing. So I almost feel like I would want to be on set, like in the action. Like I always liked, even if I wasn't really participating, I always liked being on set because it's just this it's like hectic in a good way.
It is, and I completely agree because of the three of them, that would be the one I would love to do.
Yeah, because and it's like
you're in the heart of it. You're creating.
It's different every day. Yep. It's you're meeting all these new people, and like I'm sure with the other two you kind of do that anyway. But that was always my favorite part of like running a production company. Social media was because for some period of time I got to be on set to get behind the scenes, and it was just like my first time ever being on a set, and I was like, this is amazing. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
It's addicting.
It is.
It's very addicting.
It's so addicting. And you're like, oh, everyone was like kind of miserable because that's like kind of the job. But
it is, but
in a good way.
But it's like you're miserable until the thing's finished and you're like, look at this awesome thing. Exactly. And then you're miserable again, and then you're like, look at this even more awesome
You
thing.
like think about the end product and you're like, it's going to be so great if I just get through this right now.
I mean, that's what doing a podcast is like. That's what making a video is like. That's what any creative endeavor is like. Misery, done. Even
with script writing, like I'm constantly like when I'm pre-planning and like beating out a story and whatever, you're kind of like, I'm so bad, I'm not a good writer, this is awful. Like you're in your head and you're just like, this is the worst. Like nobody's ever gonna make this. Nobody's ever gonna read this. But you just kind of like continue to go because someone said it to me once. And I always think about it personally, like for myself, is like a bad first draft is better than no draft.
Yes.
So like you and coming to like take classes and learning more about television writing and everything is that the entire industry is about revisions. You finish it and it's going to get revised 10 times, and that's the way it is.
Oh, yeah.
So like just get it out and on the paper. And then
it doesn't matter the garbage mess that you put out because you get however much to rearrange everying.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do you keep the optimism of working in this industry? It's not easy.
It's not
at
easy.
all.
It is not. I'm a mess. No, I'm joking. But
I mean, you can be a mess and still be like, oh, but I'm gonna do this.
I mean, I very successfully like hid how miserable I truly was at my one like last job from the entire world, and I was just like, I have no emotional energy for anything. I didn't write the entire time I worked at that job, and just it was very like I got laid off. You think in that moment you're just like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and then you're like, oh, I was so sad. I was just a wreck.
Yep.
That holy crap, I have this entire huge weight that's just been like, pressing you down into the floor and having no motivation is now lifted off, and you're like, oh my God,
look at
I can breathe.
That I can do.
Yeah, and that was eye-opening in a way, because I wouldn't admit it to myself. Like I had a really great opportunity, but it was bad. Did it
feel like admitting that it wasn't the right fit or it wasn't the right thing for you was like a failure? Or
yes, because you want to, especially with the age of social media and all this stuff, like you want to portray this air of everything in my life is great, and behind that it's not. And like this job was really cool, and I got to meet celebrities and do really, it was my first time on set, and it was really great, and I like felt bad because I was like, I'm not doing any of the other things that I'm also supposed to be doing, and like I feel bad, and I don't have emotional energy to like be with people outside of my husband. I'm like, I don't want to leave the couch. Like I can't even just like think about like hosting or doing this or that. Like it was just all encompassing. That made me feel even worse about everything, because you're like, no, it's supposed to be this great opportunity.
It's one of those things where just because something sounds like a dream job doesn't make it your dream job. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a pressure when you get a job like that to stick with it because it was someone's dream to be there.
Exactly. And getting laid off gave me permission to realize how sad I was and how miserable I was, and be like, it was almost a roadblock to becoming a television writer, because you know, from when I had finished my first script, I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then you have to make money, you know, like you have to make money.
Yep.
And this job was good money. And I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. Like, I have to be happy. I have to, you know, I'm making good money. I'm making this. Like, I can't give something like this up. And then when they were like, you know, we're letting you off, and, you know, you're getting this and that, it was permission to be like, I'm not doing this again. Like, I'm not doing another roadblock to what I actually want to do, because it's hard to get to writing television.
You find yourself working towards a career that's not the one you want.
Exactly.
And it doesn't benefit you anymore.
And I had gotten that advice really early in my quote-unquote career.
Yep.
Because I used to work at my mom's company as the, like, receptionist girl. And one of her bosses, so nice, Walter, he's great, he's not going to listen. My mom will probably listen, though, and tell him. He had offered me to kind of help train me to become, like, a web producer and, like, kind of project manage websites and whatnot. And I was, like, needed a job out of college. So I was really, like, highly considering doing that and taking it. And, you know, he taught me a lot about it, and I can still basic code because of what he taught me. But my mom's other boss, he kind of said to me, he was like, you know, you need to think long and hard about if you want to start this, because this is going to take you down a path that you're not really going to be able to get off of. He was like, you know, don't do something just because it's a job. Do it because you're passionate about it. And he's like, and I know that you study writing, and, like, this job is not that
at all.
And I remembered, like, you know, I was like 21 or 22, and I was just kind of dumb, but I was like, oh, that's, like, kind of smart. Like,
I mean, I guess I'll do that. At least that you had someone who was willing to say that to you and not just, like, shoehorn you into a direction.
Exactly. And, like, I could have done it, but my life would have been so much different.
And you might not have ended up out here. You might not have done all of these things.
I would probably be living in New York, and, like, my mom would be happy, but I probably wouldn't be, like.
But at that point, it's like, you might not know why you're miserable at all.
Exactly. And that's kind of how I felt with this job, and I was just like, I will never do that again.
But you seem to have been, quote unquote, destined to not be in that position, because you've taken a great upturn.
I have.
In a very immediate sense to losing that job.
Yes. And that was not the first time I'd been laid off. The first time I got laid off was this very weird situation of, like, I worked at a startup, and they were like, we're coming back. And then it was like 3 months later, and they were like, JK, we're not coming back. You know, you, like, feel like a failure, because you're, like, getting laid off versus getting fired are two very different things, because getting fired, you're not doing the job well. It's, you know, directly your fault, something's going on. Versus getting laid off, it's not really your fault.
It's not that you did something bad, but the company has other ideas.
Exactly. And, like, the first time that happened, it was a startup, so it shut down, but you're like, well, did it shut down because our articles weren't funny? Like, we weren't doing enough on social media, we weren't doing this, that. I mean, it was not that. We found out later it was not that at all.
I've heard the story. No, it was not.
It was not that. But, you know, you can't help but feel that way. And, you know, the second time, this most recent time I got laid off, it was I let myself be sad for 24 hours, because I was just like, you know, you're losing a job. It's awful. But what it came down to, it was, like, business decisions. And I totally understood that. And also, like, within 24 hours, I was kind of like, oh, I don't have to care about this stuff anymore.
No, it's not your problem anymore.
It was so, and, like, running the social media in that position, we dealt with a lot of trolls online, people talked badly about us as a company, and I was the one reading those. And one of my old bosses was like, why do you take this so personally? Like, why are you taking these things that these people are saying so personally? And I was like, because I'm getting them all day.
You get them all day. I would guess that it feels directed at you because you're the one doing all this work on the social media.
It does. And that also was what was making me miserable, in addition to everything else. But I was like, I'm constantly getting bombarded with, hate over, dumb things that people are tweeting.
Slurs.
Yes. And
great.
Even with like putting filters and stuff in place, like that is not having them call you the F word, but they're, still saying you guys rigged this to be this way and you suck. And like even those, like you can't really filter those out. It's because it's not bad, quotes, air quotes.
It's not like they're raging at you in the sense of like cussing you out or doing all those things. It's the whole...
It's subtle.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
The little needle points.
Yeah, and like, having had that quote unquote taken away, I let it be like, oh, I kind of failed. But then I realized I was like, no, I didn't fail. They made a business decision and it freed me up to, like, within 2 weeks of that, I had finished 2 scripts and like began to co-write a movie with one of my friends, and just it was like, oh, this was holding me back.
It sounds like your brain and your spirit and just like all your creativity was just like, finally I'm allowed to do my work again.
Exactly. And like, during that time, I've said it, I didn't have any emotional energy for anything else. And like, if I had free, quote unquote, free time, I would play a video game or I would read a book, because I didn't have the capacity to do do anything creative. And that also made me feel worse, because I'm like,
it's a cycle.
It was like so terrible. And like looking back on it, I'm just so happy I got laid off. So incredibly happy. And then, it was sad, and I was sad. I let myself be sad for a weekend. And then I just started writing, and I just started doing things and revising and, keeping my head down and like looking, kind of applying to jobs. And then, so I got laid off in July. Mm-hmm. And in September, my husband's parents came, and I'm in the LA TV Writers Facebook group.
Yep.
And there was a post from my now boss saying, study with this showrunner.
Yeah.
And I was in the car with, because we were driving down to San Diego, so we were like stuck in the car. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I really think I should take a class. I should, that's one of the things that people recommend to network and to improve your skill and,
Because you meet all the people who are trying to do the same thing. You get to potentially meet the people they know.
Yes.
And
it's a really good way to network. And like, I always kind of like say that all of my friends that are also scriptwriters, we're kind of all at the same level. Mm-hmm. We're working on things, we're sending it to each other, we're reading it, we're giving notes, but no one has made the leap yet. So I was like, I want to network with more people that even if we're at the same level, like they're new perspectives, new this, new that, like you can't help, like it's not going to hurt you.
No, networking is, for me, one of the worst things ever in the world.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
It is a necessary evil in this kind of industry, and I actually find it so much easier to go to a networking thing by myself, completely out of my comfort zone, than to do it with people that I know, because then it's a crutch.
It is a crutch. I absolutely agree with that.
Yep.
But I found that going to a class, because you went to high school, you went to elementary school, maybe you didn't go to college. People go to college, like. That is such a familiar place that I feel like I opened up way easier in a classroom setting to like make friends with people, because it was such a familiar
it's like
environment.
Yeah. Like you were saying, you're all on the same playing field. You're all there to be better at a thing.
Exactly. We're all trying to learn, and the teacher was great. So I signed up. I discussed it with Jack, and I was like, it's expensive, but like I really think it'll help. It's investing in my career. So he was like, yeah, I support you if you want to do that. Like, we'll do it. So I signed up for this class, And I go to the first session, and my teacher, her name is Patty Carr. She is amazing. Could go on and on and on and on about her. She show ran like Rain and the 90210 reboot. And
that's awesome.
Used to work on Reba and like Kim Possible. So I was so like excited and happy. And even like, they're 3-hour classes and
they're all from working people.
Yes. They have it's a very big distinction that they have. You have to be a working writer in order to teach classes at the school. I was thinking about it before this post came up on my Facebook and like comparing the schools in LA, and one of them, the teacher won a contest.
But how does that
help me?
That you know how to do these things, like break into an industry.
How does that give you experience in a writer's room? Or, which, and I'm like, winning a contest, great thing. Yeah. But I'm like, what are you teaching me about television writing to be in a room? Because that's the goal.
Yep.
So I had, looked into this and signed up for the class. And then I went on, after the first class, I went on their social media, and 30 minutes before I checked their Facebook, they had just posted that they were hiring a part-time social media manager. So I was like, oh my God, this is like perfect.
I want to like have a sound effect right now that I don't have that just goes,
yeah. Yeah, it was literally like the first post on the Facebook, like, we're hiring. And they were hiring like a location manager, something, and then it was like social media manager. And I was like, this is perfect.
I know this.
So I applied to it. They like forgot to write down my interview, but then we like ended up like not confirming it, but I showed up anyway because I was like, it's better than not showing up. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert, got the job. And I work there part-time, but one of the perks of it is that I can take classes there. Yeah. Which is
big.
Huge. Because classes are an investment and you're spending money on them. And, I am managing their social media, but also learning.
Yep.
And
it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, it's great. And, I love my bosses and I love taking the classes. And I'm writing so much because I get to take these classes. Mm-hmm. And because it's a part-time job.
It's not all of your time.
It's not all consuming like my last job was, even though working in social media is its own beast.
Yes.
Where you're basically working all the time.
I mean, having worked in the internet sphere, it does not have a time punch card.
No.
Nope.
Not at all. And like, again, my last job, I was in the office from like 8:30 to 7:30, and then going home sometimes and having to continue to work or being on Facebook or live tweeting a show. Yep. Or, and that is like, you never get a break. So when I got a break, I was like, I need to do something mindless, which was why it was just like video games or, it was all.
No, I understand completely.
But this type of social media, it's not all encompassing.
Because you're not doing it for like a show or a like big time event thing.
Exactly.
It's, is it mostly informative?
It's basically, we're just kind of like posting about our classes that are available. Mm-hmm. And, they have a television certificate writing program. Mm-hmm. So we just had like a mentor pizza party and a panel, and all of our television writing teachers came, all but 3 I think came. And they talked about it and talked about, helping to like mentor the students and whatever. So like I had to go to that and post about it on social media, which is also benefiting me by going to that. So I'm like, it's, good because I can benefit from it, but I'm also like, I was saying to them that I think taking these classes helps them because I can answer these people's questions as well when they... Because I'm like, someone messaged, I think, I just took a spec class because I'd never written a spec before. So I was like, why not? And this girl messaged our Facebook and was like, I'm considering taking this. Like, what is it like? And it was the spec class.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I just took it. It was so great. The professor's so good. Like, you're going to love it. You're going to learn so much. Like, you get a beat sheet, blah, blah, blah. But if I hadn't taken that class, like, I wouldn't.
You would just be like, it's good.
Yeah, it's like like when like a waiter comes over and you're like, is this, like, how's the chicken parm? And they're like, it's great. And you're like, you've literally never eaten it in your life.
So would you say, having gone through all of these kind of things, that failure has really, or like, not necessarily failure, because you didn't fail at doing these things, but it feels like it sometimes.
It always feels like
it. But the pitfalls, the ups and the downs have helped you. Like, do you think it's worthwhile?
Oh, absolutely. We were talking earlier about staying positive, and I find it hard, as everyone does, to stay positive, but I always am kind of like, I'm very privileged to do this and to be able to, pursue my passion, and like, it's hard, but doing anything is hard, and doing anything worth doing is very hard.
Plus, you get to the point where you're like, but what else would I be putting my energy into?
Exactly.
You have X amount of time in a day, X amount of energy, all that. If you're not putting it to something that's going to benefit you in any sort of way, why are you doing it?
Exactly. And like, it's not hard to be a nice person and to be happy. And like, there's people that are very jaded, and I'm pretty jaded with things too. But if I want something, I'm going to continue to work for it. And why would I work miserably? Like, I was in this job that I was miserable, and I just did it because it was a paycheck and I had to. But coming from that, I'm like, even that, I'm still grateful. I met so many great people. I had my first time on set. Like, it was still, a
learning experience.
Good learning experience that I'm like, I'm grateful I had it.
Yeah.
And it's taught me how to, value what I want and where I'm going to try to go, and made me also realize, like, don't really like doing that. Like, don't really want to be in reality TV. Like, I want to be unscripted. I want to tell stories that are not reality. So I'm like, you know what? I'm happy. I'm even happy getting laid off. Like, you have to like look at it, because initially it's always like, I'm a failure. Yep. This is terrible. Imposter syndrome.
The small rain cloud over your head that's thundering, lightning, and hailstorms.
Always. And like, you're allowed, you're human. We're all human. You're allowed to have that feeling, like, be in your feelings about it. But you need to like always remind yourself, like, okay, I can have my little pity party for, give yourself 48 hours a week, like however long you think that you need to. And then you just go, no, okay, done. Did it, good, let's move on.
It's also one of the things that I've realized is whenever you look back on the things that you felt were life-ending or like the biggest thing that could have gone wrong, you got past it.
Yes.
Like, you're here now at this other point, and even if you're going through it right now, it's you everything that you've gone through, you've gotten past.
Yes. And I am a very firm believer, and everything happens for a reason.
Yep.
Everything happens for a reason. Like, there's so many times in my life that, like, in the moment you don't realize it, but looking back, you're like, oh, these choices happened for a reason. Like, brief anecdote was like, I went to college for my first year of college at the University of Rhode Island, and I didn't really like it. So I transferred home and went to the local school in New Jersey where I graduated from. But I always knew I wanted to study abroad. So when I applied, I got accepted, I went over, I actually found out that my freshman year roommate was also going abroad and was also going to London. And I was like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, we can hang out, like, whatever.
And you know somebody.
I know someone, which was great. But what I learned was my program from my school that I chose, I was integrated in a British school with British kids. Like, I have a bunch of British friends now that I can go and stay with them, and they come, and, one of my friends married Jack and I, like, we got engaged there, like, whatever. But my freshman year roommate was in the only program URI had was at an American school in London. So she met all American kids in London, which is great. And now she, has friends all over the place. But I was like, because I transferred home to this college and did this program, I met and integrated into like British life instead of...
You got to meet a new culture and learn from that rather than the same.
Exactly. But if I'd stayed there, it would have been something... So like that one decision impacted me for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, you don't realize it in the moment. And even it was kind of like, even at that point, I was like, am I a failure for not liking this school or this place, or, you know, having to, like, crawl home, you know, and go to this small school. It wasn't like a state school.
It's also never a bad thing to have a need to go home for whatever reason.
For sure. I also, like, saved so much money.
Yep.
So much money by going to the state school in New Jersey.
Oh, as someone who didn't do that, I highly recommend.
Yeah, everyone, if you're going to college, go to state school, save money. It's
in the long term, you might hate wherever you're at. In the long term, it's so much better for you.
And you, like, if you don't get student loans, like, don't get student loans.
No.
Because I've been paying mine for, like, 6 years, and
I will be paying mine for another however many
yeah,
years.
so many years. It's awful. But, you know, that's one of those moments where I realized, you know, if I hadn't made that decision, my life would be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it just, you know, my husband makes fun of me because he's very analytical in science, but and I'm just like, everything happens for a reason. Like, I made that decision for a reason. I agreed to a date with you for a reason. Like, we moved to LA for a reason. Like, this is where I need to be. Like, if we hadn't moved to LA, I probably would have never tried to write a script, and I would still be trying to write books.
And being miserable because you're like, I hate the entirety of this gigantic part of novel writing.
Exactly. And, like, you know, script writing is so hard. Any type of writing is so hard.
Right? You're creating something from nothing.
Yes. And, you know, I lament over it, and I'm like, oh, you know,
tortured artist.
it's so, you know, it's so bad, and this, and, you know,
yes.
as everyone does. But at the same time, like, that brings me joy. Like, doing that and writing something and, like, finishing it, even if it's very bad, you finished it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a very odd sort of metaphor, it's like working out.
Yeah.
The working out part, that, like, it
Yeah.
sucks. You're like, I'm sweaty, my muscles hurt, like, I'm doing these sit-ups and
Yeah.
I'm in pain. But at the end of it, you're like, oh, I feel so good.
Yes, there's
It's a
like,
mental
you
one.
get endorphins, like,
Yeah.
for, like, afterwards when I finish it. Even if I, like, reread it and I'm like, why did I write that? I still wrote it, and
Yeah.
it's still down on the paper, and, like, you can improve upon it, like,
Or
as
you can
long
be
as
like-
you get it done.
Or you cleared a space in your head from this one idea that you had.
Mm-hmm.
You gave it the time, the attention, and you're like, now I can move on.
And even, like, with this job, I'm taking all these classes, and I'm learning, you know, how to be in a room and structure, and how to, like, you know, act outs, and how important things are, that I look back at my early scripts and I'm like, these are all so bad. Like, these are so bad, but they're done, and the idea is formed, so that now I'm writing, like, you know, I've just finished a spec, so I'm trying to do, like, an original pilot. And I'm like, once I kind of do that, I'm just going to go back and try and revise everything and write it towards all of these things that I'm learning, because you need to know how, like, you can't just tell a good story. Like, with books, you just kind of, like, tell a good story and do it in the right way. But television, there's structure. You have to, you know,
it's not
act
just-
outs
yeah.
and formatting, and, you know, you have to end on an emotional moment or a joke, or, you know.
There's a different pacing because
Yes.
you don't have the time of
Yes.
a novel.
And, like, one of the things I've learned that's very important that you don't really need, I mean, you kind of need it in a novel, but, like, it's very important in television, is, like, why are you starting this scene at this moment? Like, what does it add? How does it propel your story forward? Whereas with books, like, it's leisurely. Like, if you want to start a scene back
Yep.
and then do the whole thing
again,
you can do that.
It's why when people, like, translate a novel for television, screen, movie, whatever, people are like, how did you lose all these things? It's such a different beast.
Yes.
And as someone who will say, like, oh, the book was better or whatever, I can acknowledge the fact that when you look like you tried.
Yes.
Because there are some that don't. But it's a completely different thing, and the structure of it doesn't always lean itself to it. It's why some adaptations of things that have been done 3 or 4 times just don't work.
Yeah. And I am a self-proclaimed Harry Potter lover. We both love Harry Potter.
Yes, we do.
But I think that J.K. Rowling is not the person to be writing the movies for the Fantastic Beasts.
I think she could have written the story.
She should have written them as books. And then someone else adapted them.
Either that or have written just what the story was and then had a screenwriter work with her.
Yes. Because it's she's not a bad screenwriter.
No, like
she's just, you can tell she is an author who writes books.
Well, when I watched the last movie, it was like, I see what you're trying to do, but the way that you're doing it, we're doing this moment, this moment, this moment, this moment. We're not flowing as a thing.
And that was
because it's like she was writing in chapters.
Yes,
and that's not.
I'm like, you can't do that in screenwriting, especially. But I'm just like, I really wish she would have written it as a book, and then someone else could have adapted it because that's her. I mean, that's her medium, and she's used to.
Yeah, and she's
having so
really good
much.
at it.
Yes, having so much like time and space and whatever to like tell the entire story, and you don't have that in movies, even long movies.
I mean, I think that Avengers is supposed to be like 3 hours long.
Yeah,
and that's a very generous movie. That's the extended edition of Lord of the Rings movie.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And even they. Oh, are you a fan of The Hobbit?
The Hobbit movies?
Yes.
I mean, they're entertaining for what they are, but they're not really
There's a YouTuber who did she does film critique essays as videos.
Okay.
Did a series about The Hobbit, and it's so pitch perfect. I loved it, and as someone who's a writer, it's a good watch. It's long, so watch it in chunks. But anyway, yes. So right now, after all of this kind of stuff, what are you working towards right now?
I have made 2019 the year of the career.
Ooh. Is that your word for you?
That's like mantra. Yeah, my I want 2019 to be, I'm working, I'm taking these classes, I'm studying. I just said to Jack that like I feel like I am in school again. Like I feel like I'm back to school because I'm like working and doing my homework and going to class. And even though I'm taking one or two at a time, it's I'm like, I'm in college again, minus partying. Woo! My goal is to be in a room by next year. I'm working as hard as I can to I'd never written a spec before I took this class, and I wrote spec and I actually really liked it. There's this whole thing in the industry that you shouldn't write specs anymore because they want original pilots. So I spent all my time writing original pilots, which is, they're all bad now and I have to go revise them. But, I decided I wanted to apply to the fellowships, and, if that works out, it works out.
Yeah.
But,
putting all the good vibes.
Good vibes. Woo! You need a spec to apply to the fellowships. So I said, all right, I'll take a spec class. And it was so enlightening.
Can you explain what a spec is to people who are not in the film industry?
Sorry. I know. My mom's like, what's a spec? I'm like, oh, sorry.
I don't assume that people who listen are all film people.
A spec script is a idea for a episode of an existing show. So instead of an original story, which is very important, you also need to do as well, a spec kind of, you're living in someone else's world. You're just coming up with the story and how the characters would, make the story happen.
Which, fun fact, is how a lot of Star Trek episodes were done.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of them were like test scripts that people would send out because they wrote it in that universe, and then they're like, we like this, so.
Yes, so that is how you used to get hired.
Yep.
Back in the day.
Back in those old days.
That was, a lot of people who are senior, quote unquote, senior level scriptwriters right now talk about how they wrote a Sopranos spec or, any other type of show like that. And that's what, they had their agents or whoever send it to the show, and the show was like, we like this, we want to hire you for our room, or they were like, oh, we really like this episode, we want to buy it and make it into an episode. And it's not that way anymore, sadly. But you still need a spec for the fellowship. But at this panel that I just went to on Friday, two of the showrunners were like, we actually want specs. It's easier for me to judge your writing in someone else's world because I'm already familiar with the characters. Yep. She's like, it's very hard to, like, yes, I'm seeing story, yes, I'm seeing originality, but it takes me longer to read an original pilot than it does a spec because I'm doing the extra work and I'm not familiar with it. Whereas I'm more likely to give up earlier on an original than I am on a spec because I can, kind of see where it's going.
You don't have to have the who is this person with the
exactly.
That, yeah.
And like, they have really good points that pilots are their own beast. The pilot is, the first episode, you set up your story, you set up your world. Not every episode of television is a pilot. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you're sending an original pilot, they're just seeing one facet of your writing. They're not seeing how you would do in a room.
Yep.
And how you would do with an existing world and a story within that world. And I was like, this is smart, and I should probably do this. And I did it, and it was, I don't want to say easy, because writing is never easy, but, like, it was easier because I didn't have to.
And you knew the characters.
Yes.
You're like, I know this whole... It's as a different kind of reference from the way that I grew up. It's why a lot of authors start out in fan fiction.
Yes.
It's the same kind of journey.
Because it's just, you can set up a world. Like, you can do it. You know that you have these things in your head, but, like, writing in another person's voice is hard.
Yep.
And you have to do that as a television writer. Write specs. There's my advice. Write specs.
Do you have any advice for people who maybe they aren't writers, but they're going through all these kind of ups and downs? The best way to kind of push through?
I mean, me personally, I literally am always like, it's happening for a reason. Everything's happening for a reason. Even in your lowest low, you're going to recover, to be cliche, I don't know what the word is, but, like, it'll get better.
Yep.
It gets better. You're at your low. It feels like it's not, but, like, if you kind of say to yourself, okay, how am I going to recover from this? Like, I'm so low, I feel really bad, and how do I stop this? How do I make it not this way? And I kind of joke at certain, like, low moments in my life that I'm like, these are the moments that I'm going to probably write about for the rest of my life and use them as inspiration for characters or this or that. And, like, you have to grow from it.
Yeah.
You have to know that this is happening, but it's probably not always going to be happening. You're probably going to get better. You're probably going to recover from this. Losing my job the first time was, like, the end of the world. But that was when I started script writing. Mm-hmm. Because I was unemployed. I was trying to find a job. Like, I had all this time on my hands, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna try and write a script. And that was when I finished the script, was because I had lost my job.
And you found something that you loved.
And I knew that was when I was like, oh, I want to make a career out of it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I would not have had that realization had I not lost my job. And it was awful. It was awful. Me and 8 other people had lost our jobs. Like, but that also meant that we were all applying to the same jobs.
Yep.
And not all of us are going to get the jobs. And I was like, I'm going to do this, but I'm also going to try and write scripts. And I did, and I finished it, and I was like, okay, this happened for a reason. Yeah. I lost my job for a reason.
Yeah, you learned you could do something else.
Yeah. And it was like, I had unemployment, and I was trying to find a job, and I didn't get a job by the time unemployment ran out. So then I started doing Postmates, and I worked with you at Barnes & Noble, and then I went back to Postmates, and then I got, in April, I had gotten the other bad job. That is when everything stopped. Everything stopped. I didn't write. I didn't do this. It was great because it was a lot more money, and I didn't have to do Postmates anymore, and, it's great. But
great doesn't mean great.
Exactly, and it came at a cost.
Yep.
It came at a cost, and, like,
you had to decide if you were making your career their thing or your thing.
And I am so grateful to that job. And it was the first time I was ever on a set. And, I got to interview people, and I was immersed in a culture that I had no idea about and no knowledge of. And now I know everything about it. It was because of that job that I really knew, I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to put time and energy towards any job that wasn't going to further wasn't going to get me to the end point. Mm-hmm. And that's a really hard, like, decision to make. So it was made for me.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Yeah. And I know it can feel a little selfish, I guess.
It can feel very, very selfish, especially, like, you know, you need money to live, and it's like, people are like, just quit your job and just travel the world, and it's like...
No. Realistically,
no.
You have bills, you have responsibilities too, whether it's, like, a husband, family, whatever. You have stuff you have to do, but you have to take care of yourself and your dreams because you're living your life. If you're miserable forever, it's going to do no one any good.
No one any good. And, like, it stifled my creativity for so long. Like, I was being creative in a way of just for this job. And I was like, pouring all my creativity into it. And it still, I was just kind of like, this doesn't make me happy. Like, it's miserable. And
you found out that sometimes that dark point leads to a better side.
And I think sometimes you don't realize in that moment how miserable it is. Yep. Because I was very like, no, I'm not miserable. I'm doing all these cool things. And like, you know, I'm working a lot and
it's the on paper happiness.
Yes. And then, you know, you look back and you're like, no. No.
I actually think that's a really good place to wrap up because I think the biggest thing I learned from listening to you is just how much whatever is going on in the present is not forever, and you always have the time and the energy and the ability to turn your life to a different direction and go back.
It's true, and like, you know, I'm not advocating like quit your job, go travel, like
don't do things that can put you in like woes.
I always say to people, even like my boss now was like, how can I be as positive as you all the time? And it's just a reminder of like, as you're walking to make your dreams come true, you're working and you're going to have roadblocks and you're going to have this and you're going to, you know, have to overcome things and you're going to have setbacks and it's going to be pretty fucking awful.
Yeah.
But you're doing that so that later on down the line, when you get to where you want to be, you've earned it and you have done everything in your power to make it happen. And you know, those things happened for a reason. Like, if I'd never been let go, like, you know, I wouldn't know what it's like. And then, like, maybe I would get fired from a room in the future and I'd be like, this is the worst thing in the world. Yep. But, like, because I've kind of already experienced it, if I don't gel with someone, I'm just like, okay, that's fine. There's something else. You know, like, I think that's what you always have to think of. There will be something else. And that's hard to do.
It's so hard when you're in the moment of feeling awful.
It's so hard, but you have to remind yourself that, like, you're doing these things for a reason and things that are happening for a reason, and the reason will show itself eventually. You're never going to, like...
And it might not be how you expect.
Exactly.
But
and, like, sometimes I joke, I'm like, this is just happening because it's going to be a fun story I'm going to tell on Jimmy Kimmel one day. You know, like, I'm probably never going to, you know, I'm going to be...
Never say never.
Sure. You never know. But I'm just like, you know, sometimes I have to say that to, like, cope in the moment of, like, a really ridiculous thing that's happening to me. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to, you know, tell this story on Conan one day and be like, when I did Postmates, I ended up delivering to, like, Andy Richter one time. And I'm like, this will be a fun story when I'm on Conan one day.
You're like, hey, you know how you don't remember your Postmate people?
It was so awkward. And we walked together into your house. Like, it was, but I'm like this, you know, it's like it's a funny story to tell down the line, and like that's something that I could put a character in one of my shows. Yeah. So like everything, you just have to know everything happens for a reason. That's like my mantra for life. That, you know,
it's a good mantra.
And learn from things and know it's gonna get better, and it's happening because it's supposed to happen. Even though, you know what? Even though sometimes there's things you don't want to happen, it's happening for a reason.
Yep. And I'm sure anyone who's listening is thinking of a moment where they were like, oh my God. And now they're like, oh.
It's kind of just reshaping your view. You know,
in the moment, it's a choice.
It sucks. In the moment, it sucks. But looking back, you're like, okay, I grew from that. Or that caused me to go down this road or that road. Or, you know, oh, it's just a funny story that gave me this personality quirk. Like, it's all
part of your story.
Yes, exactly. It's all part of your story, and, you know, even the bad stuff, you have to
let go.
Yeah, you have to let go, but you also, you know, you have to be thankful for it. You know.
And with that,
I have the tradition of liking to close off the episode with a Howl to the Universe because it's one of my favorite releases.
I love that.
And you said...
Yes, I do. I have a slight anecdote about this, that when I was in college, I want to say it was like 19 or 20-ish, I had a group of friends that I am no longer friends with, but we would get into all sorts of shenanigans, and we were in our town's like soccer fields, I guess, because we would like, you know, we didn't really get drunk, and we would just like kind of drive and, you know, listen to music and whatever, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. We were in the soccer fields, and like I was with two of my guy friends, and the one guy was like, just started howling. It just started howling because like we had coyotes where I grew up, and you know, whatever, and he just started howling. So then my other guy friends started howling, and they were like, do it, like, Chelsea, like, do it. And I was still like, you know, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence, so it was embarrassing for me to howl in front of even though they're like, you know, they were my best guy friends. It was weird, and I didn't want to do it, and they like poked fun at me, and they were like, just do it, like, just let go. And I was very, you know, at that stage of my life, I was very cognizant of doing things, and, you know, I cared what people thought about, and I was like, you're gonna think I'm weird if I howl at the moon. So I never did it. I just didn't want to do it, and I was like, I'm not doing it, guys, like, I'm just not doing it. And I like look back, you had said to me that we were going to do this, and I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect like full circle moment of like, I don't care. I cared so much that I wouldn't do it. And at this point it's like, who cares?
Who cares that we're in a library and there's a window?
It's soundproof.
Mostly, yeah.
Hopefully.
It's pretty good.
I know, but I'm like, you know, so dumb that I wouldn't do it. It's so dumb. Like, we were in, no one was around. It was just them.
It's like the worst thing to happen is someone's like, can you quiet down just a little?
And you're like, okay,
yeah, sure.
We're done.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
It's all good. All right, so are you ready to just...
I would like your inspiration first.
My inspiration for...
You start it, and then I'll howl.
Okay.
Woo! That is a good let go.
It is. I highly recommend, if you're having a bad day and you're driving home, roll down the windows and howl.
That is great.
Especially if you're on a freeway, because then no one's driving slow enough to care.
That is a great release. Oh my gosh.
All right. So, thank you for being here, Chelsea.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking and making, you know, letting people learn from my stupid mistakes, but also smart.
They're not stupid mistakes. And you are one of the best people I know, and one of the best inspirations for just going after just your stuff.
Hustling hard.
And hey, hustle now, relax after.
That's exactly what I say also to my husband, who I'm always like, I'm working really hard now so that later I can be in charge.
And so, like, if I'm not seeing you that much right now, but
yes.
Give me a couple years.
Exactly. And I'm like, I'll be in charge of a set one day, and you can just come have lunch and, you know, hang out, and it'll be fine.
That could be next year.
Could.
It could be in a couple years.
I'm going to say within 5 years. I'd like to be a showrunner within 5 years.
In 5 years, we will return to this moment and be like, see, we were right.
Not there yet, or almost there.
Or you are there, and you're like, wow, I did that like 6 months ago.
Well, and that was, side note, I think 5 years ago, I set some goal of like having more of a career or something, and I was like, well, I'm not where I wanted to be, but I'm on track to it, which is more on track than I was 5 years ago. So I'm like, that's, you know,
it's a win.
I'll say it's a half accomplishment, you know, like not quite there, but getting there.
Yeah, which is always better than having stopped.
Exactly. Or, you know, I thought I'd have a book out by now, but I don't like doing that. So.
And that's the way that you learn that life is really freaking weird and always changing.
Yeah, and just learn from it all.
Learn. If you want to hear more from Chelsea, you can follow her on Instagram and Twitter. at Chelsea Says with 3 L's. Thanks for joining in our circle. Mystic Girl Cult is a bi-monthly podcast. The rest of the time, we're out running with the wolves. You can keep up with me on all social media with @Amariebythesea. Until next time, stay magic.